Hey y'all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandra Broadwell and today is the mid-year book freakout tag. I love this video. This is my third time doing this and it was one of the very first videos that I ever uploaded on my channel, so it's always really fun to come back and reflect. I love watching other people's videos. It's kind of a good way to just put your finger on the pulse of like what's hot in any particular year on BookTube. And I've had a really great reading year so far. I am in the middle of my 50th book as I am recording this, which feels really great. I don't imagine I'll be reading quite as many books in the second half of the year because I am planning to read a lot more big, thick books in the second half of the year, but it feels good to already have 50 under my belt at this point. It's currently June 23rd as I'm filming this, so I might even have 51 under my belt before the official midpoint of the year on June 30th. We'll see. Be sure to let me know down in the comments below if you're a booktuber as well and you've done a mid-year book freakout tag. Please be sure to link it down below. I would love to give it a watch. And if you're not, feel free to answer the questions in the comments below, or at least just let me know what your favorite book of the year so far has been. Let's go ahead and freak out together. Kicking off with a bang, number one question on this tag is, what's the best book you've read so far this year? And for me, it is unquestionably The Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I would give this book 6 stars if 6 stars were a thing. This is my first read through of the Stormlight Archive, but I really wanted to catch up on the series because the 5th and final book of Stormlight Archive is coming out in December this year, and I wanted to be a part of all the buzz and the hype around it. I've read other books by Brandon Sanderson. I've read Mistborn Era 1 and Era 2, but so far I've only read the first 2 books of the Stormlight Archive, but it is blowing them out of the water. Really can't wait to dive into book 3 next month. But I just felt like The Words of Radiance took everything that book 1 was building, which was also a 5-star book for me, and just like really launched the character development to a whole nother level. And I am just eating it up. It has become my whole personality now, and I'm not sorry about it. Second question is, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? I have a few answers for this actually, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. The first one that comes to mind is The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri. This is book 2 of the Burning Kingdoms, and I think this one definitely deserves best sequel because in my opinion, it was better than the first book in the series, which was The Jasmine Throne. I really enjoyed The Jasmine Throne, but I felt like The Oleander Sword totally just raised the stakes on like every level. There was a lot of angst, there was a lot of betrayals, there was a lot of battles. It just like hit a lot of really awesome notes, and it was very fast-paced and fun read, and I cannot wait for the 3rd and final book of that series to come out later this year. Another sequel that I am really enjoying right now, I'm actually in the middle of, so I can't say for sure whether it's going to be favorite sequel so far this year because I'm only 60% of the way through it as I'm filming this, but that is Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the 3rd and final book of Between Earth and Sky trilogy, which starts with Black Sun. Black Sun is one of the best first books in a fantasy series I have ever read. Such a banger. And this 3rd and final book so far has been really fun, really engaging, and I'm just having a blast and really flying through it. So yeah, I can't wait to finish and give my final thoughts in my July wrap up. My last answer for best sequel, I don't necessarily even know that this would even count as a sequel because it's technically a standalone book, but it is one of the standalone books in the First Law world, and so if you read them chronologically, it is book 5 in the First Law world, and that is The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. This entire book is just one battle. It starts with like the prelude to the battle, and the aftermath. And I think the whole thing takes place over like 3 days. It follows characters on both sides of the battle, and it's just amazing. I felt like up to this point, every single book in the First Law just got better and better and better, and book 5 definitely was my favorite one of the series so far. Number 3 is new releases that have come out already this year that I haven't read yet but want to. And I've been doing a pretty good job of keeping up with the new releases that were like my most anticipated releases of the year. I think the only one that I haven't read that is already out so far is What Feasts at Night, which is book 2 following What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I read What Moves the Dead last year. I really loved it. It's a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and I just thought it was really masterfully done. But there is no like sequel to The Fall of the House of Usher, and so the fact that T. Kingfisher decided to do a sequel sequel for it really intrigues me. I have no idea where it's going to go or what's going to happen, but since it is a horror book, I am saving it for the horror vlog that I'm planning around Halloween. Number 4 is most anticipated upcoming releases, and I'm just going to give the same answers that I gave when I talked about my most anticipated releases of the year back in December, because I don't think any new releases that I've heard of have got me more excited than the ones I was already excited for back at the beginning of the year. So obviously Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, is probably my number 1. But we also have The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Djeli Clark, which is about, I think, reincarnated assassins, which sounds really badass. The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. This will be that author's first new book outside of the Expanse series. I loved the Expanse series, the books and the show. I have several videos where I talk about my comparisons of the books and the show. So I'm just really excited to see what this author duo has coming out next. The Lotus Empire, book 3 of the Burning Kingdoms, as I already mentioned. Very excited to see how this is going to wrap up. And the last one is Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sengu Mandana. This is the same author, A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which was just an absolute cozy, delightful read last year. Number 5 is my biggest disappointments of the year, and I have 2 answers for this. Neither of them were bad books, and I don't necessarily even know if these would be like my worst books of the year, but just like my expectations were here and the experience I had was like down here. So those are going to be Book of the Ice by Mark Lawrence, and the reason I was so hyped for this is because prior to reading the Book of the Ice, I had read 4 books by Mark Lawrence. I had read a trilogy called Book of the Ancestor, and I'd read the first book in the Library trilogy. I loved all of them. And the Book of the Ice trilogy is in the same world as Book of the Ancestor, which I absolutely adored. And so I had really, really high expectations for this, and then I just really found it kind of lackluster. The pacing was all over the place. The characters were hard to connect to. It was still really interesting world building, but I really don't feel like I got anything out of it that I didn't get that was done and executed better in the first series. So that was a bummer. But I did read book 2 of the Library trilogy after reading the Book of the Ice trilogy earlier this year, and it was fantastic. So I still don't have anything against Mark Lawrence and will continue to read his books. And then my other biggest disappointment of the year is actually Red Country by Joe Abercrombie, which is book 6 in the First Law world. This is the final standalone book before you dive into the second trilogy, which is the final 3 books of the 9-book series. Yeah, I just didn't connect with this one, which, like I said, books 1 through 5, I felt like literally like stepped up a level every single time, and The Heroes was one of my favorite books of the year so far, and so I just had really high expectations going into Red Country, and I just didn't connect with it at all, and I thought the ending was really disappointing. I felt like it had been building towards a thing, and then when it happened, it just kind of went bleh. So that was a bummer, but I'm still very excited to dive into the final trilogy of First Law, because it seems like for a lot of people, the final trilogy is the best part of the entire series. Question number 6 is my biggest surprise so far this year, and that is going to be Margot's Got Money Troubles by Ruthie Thorpe. And biggest surprise simply because like this is way outside of my comfort zone as far as like my typical genres that I like to read. It's not fantasy, it's not sci-fi, it's not even historical fiction or horror or anything like that. It's just a contemporary fiction book. It's about a 19-year-old girl that gets knocked up and is trying to go to community college and struggling to pay her rent, and she decides to create an OnlyFans account, which, if you're not familiar, is kind of like a soft porn type of situation. And her father is a professional wrestler, and he like kind of coaches her or like helps her figure out like how to create an internet personality that people can really get behind. Yeah, it was just a really fun romp of a book. I felt like that was my hot girl book of the summer, and definitely would recommend it to anyone that wants just like a fun, quick read. I read it in a day. Question number 7 is favorite new author. And this is a one that I always find a hard time like answering, because I can't really say that like someone's a new favorite author if I've only read one book or even potentially one series by that author. You know, to really like solidify someone as a favorite, like I have to have loved multiple things from them. And so to fall into that category, Shannon Chakraborty definitely solidified her place this year. Last year I had read the Devabad trilogy by her, which was my favorite fantasy series that I read last year, and then this year I started her newest fantasy series, which is The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. I absolutely loved it. It's about a lady pirate that has to like get the band back together for one last mission, and it was just an absolute delight to read. So definitely Shannon Chakraborty will be on my like I will eat up anything that she puts out, please give it to me list. And then perhaps secondary will be Heather Fawcett, who is the author of the Emily Wilde series. I have read the first 2 books in the Emily Wilde series now. I really enjoyed them both. I don't know that she's like in the top tier favorite of I will read anything that she puts out in the future type of author, but I did see the announcement for her book that is planning to be coming out in 2026 already, and it is called Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. And it says it follows a widow whose cat shelter inadvertently becomes a front for a thoroughly disreputable Dark Lord magician shop. I mean, okay, yeah, you've got me. I love cats. I love like the cozy way that Heather Fawcett has been writing the Emily Wilde books, and I love the idea of just like a Dark Lord romp in a cat shop. Like, yes, I will be buying that. Number 8 is newest fictional crush. I'm not sure I've ever had an answer for this before. I don't read romances generally, but I will say that I took a long time to like marinate over this question. And I think if I was going to answer, it's not necessarily like a crush, but like my favorite love interest of the year so far has been Laurie/Teddy from Little Women. And if you've read Little Women and you know how that turns out, you know why that book is so tragic to me. But yeah, I just thought he was a really great character, and I have still a lot of feelings about that book. Number 9 is newest favorite character. I also had a hard time answering that question this year. I loved Amina from The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. I loved all of the main characters in the Stormlight Archive. I also loved all of the characters in the House of Dandelion, if you've read the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. But I didn't, even though I like loved all these characters, I can't say that like any of them were like a favorite character necessarily. Like I just thought they were all super interesting, even though they all frustrated me in different ways at different times throughout these books. I also really loved Portia from Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Portia is a spider, a sentient spider. And it's actually many different spiders throughout the book, but I just loved the way that Adrian Tchaikovsky portrayed spider intelligence. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. Number 10 is a book that made me cry, and I'm not a huge crier, but I have been getting more and more emotional, it seems, the older I get. So I have 2 answers this year. The first is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. That definitely, I almost could put it that as well in like one of my biggest surprises, because I was surprised by how much I really loved Little Women. But my second answer is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And this one, unlike Little Women, which was like kind of a cathartic cry, the cry that I had wasn't while I was reading How High We Go in the Dark, but it was one of those things where just like in the middle of the book, I just closed it and I just like had kind of an existential sob. Like, this book is about grief and death, and just really, really made me sad and depressed. And I thought about not finishing the book because of that, because I was just so depressed reading it. The writing was absolutely beautiful, but because it was so sad and didn't really have any redeeming like notes, I don't know that it was really worth my time. Number 11 is a book that made me happy. I don't have any that like immediately come to mind as like a happy book where I was like just like giggling and kicking my feet or anything like that. But I have read plenty of cozy books this year that I don't know that I felt happy necessarily while reading them, but like thinking back on them, they're like cozy feeling books. And that would be Emily Wilde, the Murderbot series, and also The Singing Hills Cycle by Nevo. Number 12 is the most beautiful book that I have bought or acquired so far this year, and I've only had one book haul so far this year. It was pretty recently. I think I got 9 or 10 books, so I'm going to show off 2 of them. Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio is definitely like, this is my favorite style of cover, where it just has like a very strong main character profile, and then also clearly gives you like an indicator of what the genre is. Like, you can obviously see this is going to be a science fiction book, and it has this like just incredible figure on the front and this like light up sword, but there's like someone's hand grabbing the other side of the sword. This just looks incredible. This is obviously like a really, really popular series on BookTube right now, so I can't wait to get around to it. And the other most beautiful book is going to be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I've been wanting to read this for a long time, and I specifically bought this copy because I thought it was so beautiful, but it's kind of got that shiny sheen to it, but it also just feels really good. And I just thought the art was really cool, of like the underwater spaceman vibe with the tentacles and stuff. So yeah, this is a classic I'm really looking forward to reading soon. And the 13th and final question of this tag is books that I need to read before the end of the year. And so all the anticipated releases that I mentioned already, any series that I'm in the middle of, I like to try and finish series pretty quickly. And so, you know, Stormlight Archive, the final trilogy of the First Law World. I also read the first trilogy of Red Rising last year, so I'd like to finish or catch up on the second era of Red Rising this year. And my biggest, like, shame book right now is Don Quixote, because right before filming this I watched my 2023 mid-year book freakout tag, and I was talking about Don Quixote in that tag, and I have not finished it yet. I've been buddy reading it with a friend, and we did put it on hold for like multiple months. We were reading it at a very slow pace, but my friend has now finished the book, and I am not super close to that point right now. So I'm really far behind, and I absolutely must finish Don Quixote before the end of the year, or I will actually be really ashamed. That's pretty much it for the mid-year book freakout tag. Like I said, please answer these questions in the comments below, or just tell me what your favorite book was. I would love to hear about it. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out with me for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read more books, and hit the subscribe button below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you again soon.